Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here, and today I'm going to make a negative video. So if that's not your thing, you don't have to watch it. But I saw this new item in the store, and I had to comment on it, make a video on it, and I won't be posting this video in the DDO.com forums because for obvious reasons, and it's another reason you should actually subscribe to me on YouTube and maybe click the bell for notifications because I don't always post all my videos there when I don't think it's appropriate. So, and that's the case this time. So let's talk about this new item, Wish of Inheritance, which I think is a really bad item. And from what I'm seeing, I'm probably in the minority on that. But I'm going to just explain to you why in this video. And first of all, this is just an opinion of mine. It's an opinion. Like you can disagree completely, and that's fine. It's just an opinion. So just I have to say that first of all. But anyways, Wish of Inheritance. This is what it does. So this is what the DDO store says. The Wish of Inheritance is a new item introduced to the DDO store. This item will allow a one-time use of changing the binding state of an equipable item from bound to character to bound to account that then binds to character on equip. Once equipped, the item will be bound to character again. Okay, so basically what the item does, it lets you take any a bound item, so say like a bound to character piece of raid loot, and you can pass it to another character. So this goes against how binding status has always worked. So in the past, really since raids came out, so let's just take raid loot for example. Those items have been bound to character for the most part. I believe all raid items have, but might be some exceptions, but whatever. Binding status of items has always been bound to character, bound to account, bound to a character on equip. There's a few other variations, but generally it's an unbound, bound to character, and bound to account. In certain items, for certain some reasons like raid loots and stuff, were always kept bound to character so that you have an incentive to raid on more than one character, and also to make that loot special. Now, you can get into a whole argument and debate about whether bound to character should exist in the game. Some people think it shouldn't. Some people think everything should be bound to account or unbound. That's fine. That really is not actually relevant to this item. It seems like it is, but it's actually not. And I'll go into more into that in a bit. So basically what this item lets you do is, again, you can move any bound item to another character. For the most part, it has to be an equipable item, so not everything can be moved, but a lot of the most important loot, so like bound to character raid loot, can be. So now, instead of having to go by the game's rules, now if you pay money, you can basically play the game by different rules when it comes to bind status, and that's the whole reason I don't like this item. And again, now let's say your first reaction to this item, which I think a lot of people had, was that, oh, this is awesome. I've had, say, a Sword of Shadow on an alt that I've never been able to use because I pulled it on a different character and it's bound to character. So this is great. Now I can take my item from that character, I can move it to my main and use it. Awesome. Now all this old raid loot that has been sitting in the bank for my alt can now be utilized. Great. But here's the thing. My point is, whether or not you believe that loot should be bound or not, is changing the binding status something you should pay for? No, it's really not. If bound items is something that the developers think is a bad design or an outdated design that they want to eliminate going forward, and they want to get rid of bound to character stuff, even though I wouldn't agree with that, getting rid of bound to character stuff, if they want to make that change in the game, fine, they can do that, and they should do that for all players. They shouldn't just turn binding status into something that you pay for, because again, as players, we should all play by the same rules. Yes, the store should offer things like conveniences. It should offer things, even some power creep items. Well, I'm not like a huge fan of. I understand why they sell some of that stuff in the store. So say like a tome, for example, you can, even though I think they should drop more in game, you can still get some tomes in game. I would like to see the higher tomes drop more, but you can still get tomes in game, even though you can go buy a +8 Supreme tome or whatever for your character and get a good boost of power that way for your character. You can still buy some of that, earn some of that stuff in game. But with this, like bound to character now in the game, for most items, again, only equipable items, is now just a paywall. So if you have enough money, you can effectively play by the game by different rules. And that's really my whole spiel on why I don't like this item. So whether or not you think bound to character is dumb or not, having to pay to bypass it is a completely different issue, which I think is really, really dumb. I think that if you think bound to character should go away, then fine, make bound to account the new norm for all raid loot going forward. Okay, so now some people will say something like, "Hey Axel, they got to make money," and I'm like, and yeah, they do have to make money. They can sell stuff like there's a lot of great ways for them to make money, and I've already talked about some of that. But generally, I think the bread and butter is new content, new conveniences, cosmetics, things like that. I don't know if that's a bread and butter when it comes to actually financial, but as I see it, the best things they sell in the store at least are things like that. So those are some good ways they can make money. But something like this, it just is not something I think they should monetize. I think it goes too far over that line of things that they should, things that are appropriate to monetize. Some other people might point out that things like TRing and say like passing raid runes to alts already let you do this to some extent. So if you run a barbarian and you get a piece of wizard gear, you can TR into a wizard and use that. Yeah. So you in some respects can pass at least items to different character archetypes. I guess it's still technically the same character when you TR, but different archetypes at least that way. And with raid runes, you can still run, so you can run raids on say one character, collect raid runes and pass them to another character. So you can kind of do that to some extent, even though you don't really have as good of a chance of getting a raid item that way, since if you're not actually running the raid on that character, you can't have the item passed to you or drop for you from the chest itself. Although, we can get into another argument about whether raid runes should be bound or not, but that's not really the point. I guess the main point I want to make with mentioning that is whether or not you're a fan of how raid runes work currently, this just takes things one step further. So whether you think raid runes were appropriate or not, this just takes things even further, definitely to a point where I don't think it's appropriate. Whereas with raid runes, I'm okay with that, even though you can kind of get around bound to character that way. I think that this, though, having the direct ability to pay to bypass bound to character with a specific item, I think that definitely crosses that line. So next, let's talk about the price. So a lot of people pointed out that it's really expensive. So they, unlike say something like raid timer bypasses, they priced this Wish of Inheritance really high. So it is 2,995 DDO points. So basically $30 to transfer a single item. So why do they do that? Well, I think people who kind of who like the item are going to say, well, they did that because they want bound to character, to protect bound to character, for it to mean something. And yeah, that's true. It's true that less people, of course, will buy the item now since it's priced so high. It won't get abused, say like raid timer bypasses are. It won't get abused just simply because it won't become like the norm because of that price. But you certainly will have a subset of players. There is a subset of players, guys, who will just dump tons and tons of money, and they will buy stacks of those things. So even though less of the population is going to abuse this than would if it was priced low, it's still bad. Again, just because it's having less of a badly designed item doesn't make it good. Just less of it is still bad. Like less bad is still bad. Less bad is not good, and it still doesn't mean that in its design it still isn't bad in terms of design either. Like that isn't related to how much it sells. If it's a bad item, it's a bad item, regardless of how much it costs. Also, other concerns I have is, how is this item going to impact loot design going forward? Will more loot that would have been bound to account now be made bound to character simply for the purpose of players having to pay to bypass it just to make money? That's another concern I have. Is more stuff going to be bound to character now because of this item? There's going to be stuff they make, powerful items they make bound to character intentionally just to sell wishes of inheritance. Because now bound to character, again, for any equipable item, is just a paywall. It's not a fixed rule anymore. And again, it's not a fixed rule that everyone has to follow anymore. So that's my main objective towards this. And one other thing I forgot to mention is that this item is also limited in terms of it says it's a limited time item. So they're not going to keep it as a permanent item in the store apparently, But again, that doesn't mean it's good. Like less bad, even if it's being sold less often, that still, instead of permanently, that still doesn't make it good. That's still less bad. Again, less bad is not good. So an item that I feel to be flawed being in the store probably isn't flawed it's not flawed in terms of making money, but flawed in terms of fair design, I guess, to the game. Just that being in the store less does not make it good. Again, less bad does not equal good. And that same goes for it only working on equipable items. Just because it doesn't work on everything, again, it's still bad in design just because you can't pass certain items. So say like one that was pointed out was the Jack Jibber's blade, which I believe does not equip, so you can't transfer that one over from bound to character to another character. But again, that doesn't make the item good just because it can't be used on, it can only be used on a lot of items instead of all items. So I guess, guys, in summary, I mean, for people that saw this and had the reaction of, hey, I've got that Sword of Shadow and now I can transfer it, this is awesome. Just, that's not really my gripe here. My gripe is not really that that bound to character should stay fixed bound to character. It's just, if they're going to make bound to character this is my point, if they're going to make bound to character a thing in the game like it's always been, then it should be the same rule for everyone. It shouldn't be a mechanic that you have to pay to bypass. It should be a rule that everyone has to play by. And if the SSG decides they don't want bound to character to be a thing anymore, then they can go and make all items going forward bound to account, or even retroactively get rid of bound to character stuff and make it all to bound to account if they want. But this item is just there to create an artificial paywall to monetize the game. And I just don't, I think that goes over the line for me personally. Just, I don't like this item at all. So guys, that is going to be it for this little rant here. I'm probably in the minority here. And if you have a different opinion, or if you agree with me, either way, feel free to post below and I will try to respond to you if I can. So yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one. I'll see you all next time. Take care.